event guard their own groins after the impact to the other fellow. Even the woman does it. She makes an uncomfortable motion. Why are they doing this? Because their brains are running a model in their own head that asks the question, well, what if I had been struck in the groin? And it makes them want to guard it as if they had been struck. This is why behavior is contagious. That's why this is unpleasant to look at. It's because your brain runs a simulation that says, well, what if a needle were stuck through my forearm? I suspect this is a Photoshop job. Actually, I got this from the internet, but it looks Photoshop to me. But that's why it's unpleasant to look on, is you're running that simulation in your head. And events like this are what led Mark Twain, long before neuroimaging, to remark, by trying, we can easily learn to endure adversity. Another man's, I mean. It's somewhat unpleasant to look at other people's adversity because it's modeled in our own head. Ralph Waldo Emerson, around the same time, also remarked, let us treat men and women well, treat them as if they were real, perhaps they are. This is the part right here of your brain that, for the purposes of our talk and in a mild simplification, generates emotion. So this is the part of your brain that models the emotions that other people feel and exhibit. And this is the part of your brain which is active when you are interpreting and modeling the emotions of other people around you to make sense of them and to find out what it is they're feeling. So that's the modeling function of this portion, which is really the anterior temporal lobe. This thing right here, this kind of thing, thumb-like protrusion, is the temporal lobe, and this is the anterior temporal lobe. So these are just some imaging studies in people who are losing empathy because of a degenerative brain disease. And what we see is that their loss of empathy is highly correlated with deterioration in the same region, this anterior temporal lobe that models or that produces emotions in you and models emotions in other people. Similar view here. So this might lead us, say, to the first law of empathy, which is that empathy begins with the covert modeling of what other people are doing and experiencing. Anton Chekov, the playwright, once remarked, everything I know about human nature I learned from me. And that's what he's talking about, that in drawing characters and creating them, he used aspects of himself, as we all do. Because in order to understand somebody else, we're using ourselves as the initial canvas upon which to paint or model somebody else. What happens if this doesn't work so well? What happens if you have some problem in the temporal lobe that prevents you from modeling other people's emotion? What happens is that you become a sociopath. So this is an experimental situation in which people are in an emotion-generating paradigm. I think it's the fear of being shocked. Here you see a normal person generating activity in several brain areas. Here's that anterior cingulate cortex again up here in a different view. This part right here is where emotional information is fed into the cortex. This view is the undersurface of the brain, like we took the brain, just flipped it over and looked. Now you can notice the contrast between this and this. See, in sociopaths, no activation in these emotionally relevant areas, none whatsoever. This next study is even more illuminating in this respect. Similar paradigm, enormous amounts of emotional activation here in the normal person. In the sociopathic or psychopathic person, we see nothing. So that one of the ways to understand sociopathy is an empathic problem that is caused by the inability to model other people's suffering. So the reason that sociopaths are not disturbed by other people's suffering is they cannot model it. There's nothing going on in their brain to make other people's suffering unpleasant to them, and it isn't, generally speaking.